Now joining us is David Frydlinger, author, partner, oh my gosh, look at my pronunciation today, Advokatbyrå. Yes, almost got it. Thank you so much for joining us today,
thanks for having
David. And after many experts within sustainability, you represent a totally different profession, being a lawyer and an author.
Yes.
Of your fantastic new book.
Yeah, so that's why I'm here. I have written this book about sustainability law. That's what I'm going to talk about.
And before jumping into the book, have you seen an increase in sustainability clients or matters at the firm in the past years?
Yes, of course. I mean, it was said before, the Swedish market is really at the forefront. And of course, we are a business law firm. We follow our clients. And of course, they have an increasing number of questions in transactions, in supply chain contracts, in compliance questions. Of course, a growing interest, but also a lot of confusion and searching, so to say. So that is one of the reasons why I wrote the book also.
Yes, definitely. And let's get back to this. By writing this book right now, what is it that you want to achieve with it, and why is it so important?
I think we're making progress in sustainability, but it's going too slow. And one of the reasons why it's going too slow, it's because it's a mess. And I will have a slide about that. It's really complex, confusing, etc. So I wanted to create clarity, and other will have to be the judges if I achieve that. But that is the purpose.
And what part of during the creative writing process got the author David to tick? The idea sketching, the research, the writing, or the marketing part?
I think all of it. This is my 7th book, actually, but this was my most personal one. I think many of you are here also because we have our children to think of. And I didn't want my teenage kids in 24 to ask me, what did you do during the 20s, David? And I don't have an answer to that. That was what made me tick. It's because of the kids.
But that's fantastic, because I think we're all kind of feeling that and thinking those things as well. Yeah. Well, David, the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. So I said previously, David Frydlinger is my name. I'm an attorney and a partner at Serial Law Firm in Stockholm. I am also the author of this book, Game Rules for Sustainable Business, Spelregler för hållbar affärsverksamhet. I'm going to talk about this book. And I think, now many of you are here, you know a lot, but I think you also face this challenge with the sustainability mess. It's a lot of acronyms. It is a SFDR, it's a CSRD, it's a TSFX, etc. And there are 17 sustainability goals with 169 sub-goals, and then you're totally lost. And then also, I think, in my experience, when I talk to clients and talk also to you here, and there has been a lot of talk about the data, and that is of course important, but I think also that's part of the challenge right now. So one of my messages, so to say, here and also in the book, is to maybe not start with the materiality analysis and drown in the data. If you saw that tool that the IFRAG published the other day, there's a helping tool in Excel with 1,378 data points in total in the ESRSs. It's easy to get lost. And I think it's important to understand that the data is important and you have to get it, but it's also only showing part of sort of the symptoms of the problem, the symptoms of sustainability. And this is part of also the message of the book, why I call it Game Rules. You have to look into this black box, which is the organization, and look what is really causing this. And that's the rules of the game. And I will come back to this slide, what it tells you. And I think here, coming from a legal point of view, that I think the EU legislation can be a very helpful tool. It's part of what's creating the mess with the 1,378 data points. That's also becoming, of course, of the legislation. But the legislation is quite good, actually, and if you read it in a specific way, which I will explain to you, I think it can provide you with a lot of clarity and hopefully a common language throughout the organization, from the owners to the board, to the management, to the sustainability officers, all the way down to procurement and everyone else. So let me just, in a few minutes actually tell you how all this fits together with the acronyms and the legislation, etc. A bold statement, but I have done it before, so let's see if I can make it now again. Okay, so, and there was supposed to be an animation here, but now it's no animation. But we start here from the bottom. It all begins with the sort of UN Declaration of Human Rights, the ILO core conventions, European Convention on Human Rights, etc. And this, because this is the core of it all. The protection of human dignity, focused very much on equal rights and equal liberty. As we know, or as many of you know, those common declarations, etc., are not binding for companies. They are binding in the relationship between an individual and the states, and between the states, but they're not binding for companies. And this is the reason why we have these two core documents, which I know most of you know what they are. The OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises and the UN guiding principles for business and human rights, which sort of try to transform or translate, so to say, what does the UN Declaration and the human rights mean in the relationship between business, society, business, and humans. Okay, so that's the next stage here. The core principle, the core norm, so to say, to extract from these two documents is the norm of due diligence. You will not see this norm written anywhere, but you will see it as a process. And you know this is a process. The process of adopting policies and formal documents to systematically identify risks and to eliminate and avoid sustainability risks, to have remedy mechanisms, etc. But that's a process. Really what this is about is that that's a norm. It's a fundamental moral norm stemming from these underlying documents, how to behave as a responsibly acting company. Okay. Now enters the European Union and the European Commission and thinking, okay, now we have to follow the Paris Agreement and we want to do our contribution to the Agenda 2030. Where to start? Okay, we follow the money, right? So we start with the most power is, that's in the financial market, and enters the SFDR, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Directive, right? And then the EU taxonomy. Okay, how to make the financial market actors sort of have their money transferred into more sustainable business and to promote sustainability in markets through that? Well, what we do then, we have what I call an ideal depiction of the ideal investor. Let's think about the morally perfect investor. How would they act? And that is a way to sort of, it doesn't say so in the SFDR, but this is how you should understand it. So we put up this moral ideal. How would a financial investor acting in accordance with the due diligence norm act? Okay, so they would probably think about generating sustainable value over a long time. They will integrate sustainability risks into their investment decisions. They will also take into consideration also the bad influence and the negative impact that their investment might have. They will have compensation systems which promote what's really important, and what's really important is to only really make sustainable investments. And of course then also to report about this. So this is what the SFDR is about. Here is the ideal investor, the morally perfect. It's sort of a strange word to use, but that is how it is. The morally perfect investor, and here is you. Please report how you relate to this ideal depiction. Okay, and then of course, but what's a sustainable investment? That leaves a lot of room for interpretation, of course, and a lot of room for greenwashing, etc. So let's specify in detail exactly what can we call a sustainable, an environmentally sustainable investment. And that is what the taxonomy is all about. The most boring legislation ever written, of course. If you have read it, this page is up and down, just the taxonomy explaining this is what you may call a sustainable business. But that's what the whole idea. Okay. But this is, of course, not enough for two reasons. So now we have trouble with the slides, so let me just improvise without the slides. Okay, so we have two problems at this stage. I am the ideal investor. I want to behave, etc. But I don't have the data. The current legislation doesn't support me with enough data from the companies that I'm owning or lending to. And of course, not only all power also lies in the financial markets. There are pretty large companies also present here which have a lot of impact, positive and negative impact. So we need also them to act. And that is why we have the CSRD, which is at the next level. And here, okay, now we have the slides back in business. Okay, so this was the ideal depiction for sustainable investments. And here's the CSRD. Okay, I'm back on track. Thank you. So here is, and you will not see this if you read the legislation. This is sort of a lawyer's interpretation of this. We use sort of legal methodology to find, but you will find it in Article 19A of the CSRD and in the ESRSs, this ideal depiction. Starting, surprisingly enough, you're not supposed to tell what's the purpose of the company. But this is a discussion that we must all have, not sort of what is the purpose of the company, is it profit maximization, etc., but what's the purpose of your companies? So that's the question to ask. And then also to think about, in the ideal depiction, you have a business model where it's sort of built into the business model not to cause substantial harm to anything, and probably also to promote environmental and socially beneficial goals. You will have to have a strategy to think about the transit. It's not okay, now we have this CO2 emitting factories over here, let's close them down. Well, maybe not, because then all of a sudden we have a lot of unemployment created, etc. So we have to have a strategy about that. That's also in the ideal depiction. And all this is translated into an organization where we have a board of directors who is very knowledgeable about sustainability matters and have frequent reporting to them. And we have an organization, maybe with a CSO, as was discussed here before, of course a role, but it's not enough to just to allocate this to the CSO. To run around and collect the data, etc. This has to be throughout the organization. This has to be implemented into processes. In the ESRS, it's called, you are supposed to report about activities, which is a bit an unfortunate sort of activity, as if it is a project. But these are really processes. It's the repetitive behavior, of course, which creates sustainability or unsustainability. So you have to have this norm of this fundamental norm implemented into the processes. Of course, you have to look also at incentive systems. It's not okay to have, it's great if you have a CEO who have incentives tied to decreasing CO2 emissions. But the problem is that money talks, then he or she will focus on that and maybe not on biodiversity, etc. And also it's not okay in the ideal depiction, of course, to have a CEO having that kind of incentive, but your chief procurement officer is only after squeezing the margins of the suppliers. From a moral perspective, that is similar to having a person who lacks integrity, basically. So this is how you should think about this. And then, of course, we have also in the ideal depiction have a lot of transparency. But also see here that transparency part, the reporting part, the data part comes last. It's really important, but sort of the really game-changing things are much sort of, if you go counterclockwise here, all the way up to the purpose of the company. And of course, when you do this reporting and when you look at the ESRSs, etc., then you realize that, well, we are not acting in a legal vacuum here in the reporting environment. There are a lot of mandatory legislation. Of course, we have environmental law, which have existed for a long time, but I think they should be updated now based on what's coming from the European Union. We have, especially in Sweden, strong forceful labor law, we have marketing law, data privacy law, etc. So it's not in a legal vacuum. I also write about this in the book, because those of you who are sort of sustainability officers and others here, this is also a book for you, but I think you should know sort of what kind of legal environment are you working in. And then, of course, on the top here, then we have two things. To the left, let's not talk so much about that, sort of that's the guiding documents, but the contracts, critical thing. I write a lot about contracts in this, and think about this. All your revenues and costs, apart from taxes, etc., runs through contracts. And the company's behavior in the market is fundamentally guided by contracts. And many of them are, and the most important with the largest volumes, are written in ways which generate not only cost inefficiencies due to a large use of power and traditional contracting practices, but they also generate a lot of sustainability. So it won't help if you have a code of conduct which you enforce upon the supplier and you enforce it back to back throughout the organization. That won't help. You need to rethink how the contracts are actually written to move into more of a partnership direction. And this is also part of the book. So you can see that this all fits together from the investment level to the business down to the supply chain level, where you have these ideal depictions which you should focus on, and it's a way I try to sort of break it down into its pieces, so you can look, where do we have our most sort of largest challenges, and where do we start? Where do we begin when we change this? And I'm saying not in the data. The data is important, but this is where you create the change. So okay, so what I think and this is not in the books, this is sort of conclusions from the book, how I would approach this and when we discuss with our clients. Think as a doctor. My father is a doctor, my sister is a doctor, etc. So that this came naturally to me to think as a doctor. Of course, I mean, you should do a preliminary analysis of the symptoms, but if you have a doctor who only keeps on looking at the symptoms, etc., you will get lost, equal to drowning in the data. And then do a scan against this ideal depiction. And when you have done that, then this is also the purpose of the book, to simultaneously transform your business and also fulfill the reporting requirements at the same time. And this is how it theoretically could look like if you do this kind of scan. Well, you start with the purpose of the company. It's orange here. Okay, so maybe a yellow light on the business model. Strategy didn't exist at all here, and the board of directors had no knowledge. Okay, this is a very bad scenario. I know sort of Swedish market companies are typically further ahead than this. But the important thing here is that this kind of slide or this kind of overview will give also a common view, as I said, from the owner to the board of directors, to the management, etc. You know also where to focus, where to have our largest gaps. And also you should know that if you start with the last one, with the data, I mean, then you attack the symptoms, not very much will happen. The larger and the faster you will want to make impact, the more counterclockwise you have to go, starting with the purpose of the company. This is sort of just pure sort of change, simple change management. This is where you should focus and can have these discussions. Okay, so that is a quick guide to what I'm trying to achieve with the book. I have this stand over here. There are a few copies of the book, I think you won, and they will give it away to people who are very active in the chat or something. But also, if you want to have rebate coupons for the book, please come and buy it. And I will, since this is because of the kids, I will give all my royalties to UNICEF, of course, because this was all about the kids. Thank you for listening.